Let's talk about impeachment first. No one's surprised about how this actually ended up. Trump was acquitted, but he's acquitted on the majority of senators voted to convict him. But there is it requires a two-thirds majority, and so I think it was something like 50 some odd senators voted to impeach him, to convict him. 40 some odd senators voted to acquit him. There are some Republican defections, which is not surprising. In terms of, remember, this is a impeachment is not a legal trial; it's a political trial, and I mean it's based upon illegal acts, and so, but there's not the same standard of evidence. There's not the same, protections like as there would be in a court of law. Now, that's not to say those standards shouldn't be applied, but nevertheless, there's no legal imperative to apply them. And now, a couple things came out of this, right? Was Trump guilty of what the House managers accused him of? Well, I mean, did he incite a riot? Did he, you know, did he do so? There's a strong argument for that, and I'm not going to say whether I believe he did or did not. I think there's a very, very strong argument. I think the House managers did a very good job of describing that. So the House managers did a very good job laying out, that did the president incite an insurrection? And in large part, they did a pretty good job outlining, kind of, Trump repeatedly said, this is fight, do all these different things, and he incited, said we're going to march, and then said things were stolen, we had to take things back, and that's a pretty strong case for what he had done. And there's a lot of connections you can draw from there. Now, Trump's defense is something to the extent was, I'm using normal political rhetoric, and his defense, played a large montage of left-leaning senators or Democratic senators using the same type of rhetoric. Is that a form of hypocrisy? I mean, at one level, yes, it is. That's a fairly strong argument that, hey, this is normal political rhetoric. Context matters, however, though, and there is an argument to be made that in terms of context, that when Chuck Schumer's on the steps of the Supreme Court using veiled threats, that's not the same as Trump saying march upon Capitol Hill and take back the election. Both are incendiary. Both are people should be critical of. Now, Lindsey Graham floated the idea that they could impeach Kamala Harris for her rhetoric during the summer for the Black Lives Matter movements and funding, help bail out, supporting a fund to bail out people who had been rioting. I mean, there is an argument there. I don't think it's as strong. Is there going to be a tit for tat? I doubt it. Now there is room for doubt, however. Now what the Trump's legal defense argued is that you can't convict it. You can't really charge someone who's already out of office, and I think that's what most of the senators who vote to acquit used, right? I think most of them probably agreed that at some level Trump had incited this, and he was responsible. Mitch McConnell had a very incendiary speech where he said essentially that he wasn't going to convict out of a technicality because you can't convict someone who's already out. You can't remove someone from office who's already out of office. But he said that Trump holds culpability and that he could be criminally charged. And there's several criminal investigations against Donald Trump for things he has done in office. And so I think that is I think that that quote unquote technicality, as someone put it, is what a lot of the Republican senators voted on. Now, NPR, they discussed this, really, their analysis are pretty bad, in my opinion, because Mara Liasson, the person who was their legal affairs analyst, said essentially that this was Congress saying that the president can do such things and whatnot as a whole, saying that, and that's just bad analysis. This is not Congress speaking, or the Senate speaking as a whole. This is 100 individuals with their own reasoning about this, and I think that's a really reductionist way of viewing it. Now, does this mean the next president who wants to engage in such rhetoric can, at whim? No, I don't think so. I don't foresee another president anytime in the near future engaging in this type of rhetoric. I can't see Joe Biden doing it. I can't see any other potential Republican nominee doing it. I think Trump is an anomaly. And Trump seems to believe what he's spouting, and he believes that his election really was stolen from him. And I think there's a certain level of of not, I would say, psychological disconnect there in terms of how he views losing and whatnot. Trump has had a whole brand on winning, and the idea that he could lose to Joe Biden, just he could not wrap his head around. And he believes all the conspiracy theories. He was the one arguing that Barack Obama was not a U.S. citizen, and there's no evidence to support that. Most of the evidence people cite for this stuff is just not not evidence at all, and it's hearsay. And if you go through, as I said before in the course, if you go through the actual evidence people cite for the election fraud, it falls apart really, really fast. Even though Trump's own lawyers in Pennsylvania, when asked directly by a judge if they have evidence, they admitted they don't have any evidence. And so, again, there's no evidence that there's any election tampering. And Trump didn't make that argument as well, and during the impeachment. And so I think that's pretty. But Trump seems to believe it, and so that's probably why he's using such rhetoric. I don't know what he thought would happen. That's really it's really bizarre to me. What did he think was going to happen when he uses this rhetoric and sends people loose? And people, the people who were the rioters slash insurrectionists, whatever you want to call them, protesters, they are now saying, well, we were duped. In large part, they were. Now, Trump's grip on the party is, the other piece in the NPR analysis was that, they had a very cynical, Trump's saying that, Trump still has a grip on the party, and the senators voted, the Republican senators voted not to convict him because of his grip. And I think that's partially true. There's certainly that argument, but I don't want to discount the legal argument as well. I think there is a valid argument there. I don't necessarily. I think the opposite is also a perfectly valid argument that you can impeach someone who's out of office. I think which way you view it, it's hard to say. The last impeachment of Donald Trump that we have two now is, the arguments are much more ambiguous. There was two professors and three professors gave testimony on whether or not what Trump did in the previous impeachment was legal or not. And if you listen to all three professors, you heard two for impeachment, one against impeachment. They're all fairly reasonable arguments, and you could walk away from either one saying, what, that makes sense to me. And was Trump guilty last time? I think there was definitely malfeasance going on. Whether that rose to that went on, whether that rose to the level of impeachment, that is a separate question, and I think it gets a little more ambiguous. I think there's strong arguments both ways. And this time, I think the argument, the ambiguity is not nearly as much there. I think Trump, there is in terms of what Trump had done, in terms of whether they can convict us a non-sitting president or impeach a non-sitting president, that was the technicality. But Trump definitely holds a grip on the party, and Trump has vowed to primary out people. And the Republican Party, typically the party out of power, will have an identity crisis, and they'll have to figure out how to manage that. And will this be the party of Trump, or will this be the party of conservatism or traditional Republicans? And you're starting to see splits. And I think Trump, will Trump run again for office? My guess is probably not. I don't foresee him running in 2024. I don't foresee him running for a Senate seat. I don't know where he'd run. Governorship, I think that's, in terms of his own psychology, that I don't think that's going to play into it. I don't think that's going to play, and I don't think he would win, to be honest with you. Will this tarnish his legacy? Absolutely. If you look at the polling numbers of this, many more people in the last time believed that he was guilty of inciting insurrection, and so I think that the polling numbers are against him, and this really, I think, left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. Now, amongst the party, Trump is, Republican loyalists, he's still quite popular. Nevertheless, amongst moderates, he's not, and this probably alienated a lot of moderates and alienated a lot more traditional Republicans, and so I think Trump's base is very strong and very vocal, but that base has dwindled to some degree. And I think that the idea that they can just primary out Liz Cheney or various other people is, I think certainly possible, depending on how much money if they throw at it. But I'd be curious if they're actually able to accomplish it. So I mean, I don't know. I think this is definitely going to hurt Trump in the long term in terms of his ability to drum up support and drum up support against people who went against him. I mean, there was a lot of evidence given that, Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell both come out Kevin McCarthy, the minority leader in the House, was there was a report of a yelling match between them during the riots or insurrection, whatever you want to call it, and that was pretty damning, as well as Mitch McConnell's criticism of Trump. Now, Lindsey Graham, the Republican from South Carolina, said that that was not a good thing for the party. And, I don't agree with Lindsey Graham. I think that that's the party's going to have infighting no matter what, and I think that's the party, the Republican Party needs to decide what they're going to be, and that's really good for the Democrats right now. But we have quite a bit of time before the next election, and that's going to be there's a lot of time to work this out, and to Joe Biden, you're already starting to see some chinks in the army of the Biden administration in terms of what their policies are and what they've been doing. So that's going to Joe Biden is going to be criticized. He's going to have policies that are not going to be popular, and that's going to be a good fodder for the Republicans. Okay, moving on. COVID. The vaccine rollout is haphazardly, which we talked about before. Joe Biden has some ideas to make that more efficient. This is not surprising. We also see a similar problematic rollout with the European countries, and this is not surprising at all about this. Now we're seeing a dip in COVID numbers because things are warming up, because of the holiday spikes are over, but nevertheless, this is going to be here for some time. Joe Biden's already primed us to think that we will near. He started speaking that we might need to wear masks into 2021. I think that very well might be true. It's unfortunate, that might be true, but this is the longer this really drags out, the worse it's going to be for Biden. It was really bad for Trump. I would argue that if COVID weren't around, Trump probably would have easily won. He would resoundingly won, I would argue. But if Joe Biden, he came into office, he was, trying to fix this. That was the mandate to get this solved. And if it drags out for a lot longer than the people thought he would, that's going to hurt him. Whether he's responsible or not, it's relevant. It's going to cause him damage. And now, Kamala Harris this week said there was no plan in place for COVID. Anthony Fauci previously said that was not the case. I mean, you have to take what someone says. You have to understand their perspective to understand the truth level of what they're saying. Is the incoming administration going to say, hey, these guys did a great job, they left us with a great plan? Or are they going to say, oh, these guys left us with nothing? Famously, FDR during the Great Depression, when he was coming to office, Herbert Hoover, said, hey, and after the election was over, FDR won. He says, why don't you come and help us and start implementing your policies now so we can get this really solved? FDR said no. he said no because he didn't want Republicans having any ownership of the fix. Pretty cynical, pretty Machiavellian in nature. And I would argue that it's very rare that someone's to to um, going to complement their opponents in politics, and I think that's going to be the case. So, does that mean the Trump administration was doing a bang up job? No, they clearly were not. I think Trump had a haphazard policy. It was wrought with a lot of inefficiencies, with inconsistent messaging, and I think Trump was preoccupied with the election, which is unfortunate. And I think that was quite problematic. And nevertheless, vaccine rollouts were going to be problematic no matter what. Moving on, Joe Biden has decided to rejoin the UN Human Rights Council, which is not surprising. Typically speaking, Democrats have a much more favorable opinion of the United Nations. Now, the United Nations is one of those funny things about right-wing politics. There's this look at this view of the United Nations as being, this one world government being really restrictive, and they're really a paper tiger. They have no power whatsoever. It's really quite startling to me. The United Nations is powerless. You look at where they've exerted power; they've done a pretty terrible job at it. I have some experience looking at analyzing United Nations policies and in peacekeeping actions in Africa, and they're pretty terrible in terms of actually preventing war. I look at what they've done in Congo and Rwanda as pretty much failures. Peacekeeping operations are by definition not that strong, and so in terms of the Human Rights Council, there's a whole host of hypocritical policies there, because you have people like China and Iran and various other countries who have terrible human rights abuses being on that council at various times. And that's just the nature of the beast, however, because the United Nations is not designed to be, you don't have to pass a morality test to be on that council. Each state is viewed equally, and so of course you're going to have Burundi lecture us on human rights abuses, even though they have terrible human rights abuses in their own country, and that's just the nature of it, right? And so the United Nations is a useful tool. It's a useful forum for us, and so rejoining that is not surprising. Nevertheless, there is a lot of hypocrisy involved in that. The census has been delayed. Not surprising. There's been a lot of hurdles with the census. Trying to do a census during the pandemic has been a nightmare. And my mom actually was a census taker, and she said it was a nightmare working for them. My mom was a very tolerant lady, and she was frustrated every night she worked for them. She'd call me up and say, "This is ridiculous," and it was very. I mean, I don't know if that's indicative of every census or this particular census, but it's delayed. Now, the problem with that delay, though, is that as you've heard in the course, that those census numbers will determine districts and gerrymandering and how those districts are drawn. And if there's a delay, that could delay how the redistricting process, and that will have immense political outcomes. And so certain states are eager to redraw their maps because they'll benefit certain parties, and that might not happen. Okay. So moving on, there's a fair level of court vacancies available to Biden. It's not surprising that several appellate court judges, district court judges, waited until Biden became in office to leave. I mean, I think Republicans did the same under Trump, and Trump had a lot of picks. Now, Biden might not have as many picks in terms of the Supreme Court or the federal courts. But these vacancies matter quite a bit, because you can appoint judges that are much more ideologically different. Now, in theory, they all should respond similarly to similar cases, and for the most part, they do. Certain controversial cases, however, they will decide differently. Abortion, gun control, voting rights, and whatnot. There's a wide breadth of opinions about how those policies should be implemented, and I think that, and so these vacancies matter quite a bit. Trump has actually appointed more court appointees than any president, I think, ever almost, and so that will reshape the court quite a bit. Now, I would probably think the left wing or Democrats are probably going to want to do a similar strategy. I'm not sure how successful they will be, but we'll see. Moving on, President Biden spoke with Xi Jinping of China, the president of China. Um, was the Trump administration took a very hard line against China, and there's that. I mean, people criticize them pretty thoroughly, and I think that those criticisms were necessarily bad. I think the Trump administration, China is a bad actor. China is does a lot of things trade wise that are not good, militarily wise, power wise, you name it. China is a bad actor. The same with Russia, the same with Iran. Now, what Trump did in terms of trade policy was, was it good? Was it bad? Part of it was good. Part of it was bad. It came at an interesting time, and so what's interesting is the Biden administration is coming in and they're not just undoing everything; they're evaluating things, and I think that's interesting. Biden's picked several different people who in high level positions to be that are China critics, and I think that's interesting. Now, I think Biden seeks to cool tensions with China. We both need one another, and I think he's really pushing to do so, but also keep a hard line. He needs to. China is trying to assert themselves on the world stage, and they've done a pretty good job with Trump in office. They've been able to have themselves viewed as the new leader of the world, and I think that's dangerous, as Russia. And so Trump was an isolationist, and that was allowed other actors to enter the scene and to start exerting influence. Joe Biden's not an isolationist, and that's going to he's trying to reassert ourselves, and he's going to need to work with China to some degree. Now, the question is how much can he work with China? That we don't know. Now, there are people who believe that Joe Biden is, in bed with China and whatnot. That's utter garbage. There's no evidence to support that. And I think what you'll see is that he will try to cool tensions, but he's also going to maintain several Trump era policies as well in terms of trade. I mean, Trump essentially did a lot of the dirty work for trade, and Biden might keep that in place because it's useful. Moving on, Neera Tanden was on Capitol Hill for her hearing to be approved her position in as the White House as the head of the White House Office of Budget and Management, which they write a lot of the budgets the Biden that the president wants to have implemented. So they're going to work closely with senators and House members. The problem is that she's been quite inflammatory in her social media, and she's had to apologize for that. And I think this is problematic. I think it's problematic because of the tone people have set, and should her social media matter in terms of her appointment? In one respect, no, it shouldn't at all. It should be her qualifications. In another respect, though, if she's being vetted by the Senate and going to work with these people who she calls all types of horrible things, what type of working relationship can they have? Does this show hypocrisy? Now you might say, Professor Hampton, you're quite critical of people being critical of that Georgia Senator Green, Representative Green, last week. You're right that I was critical of that, but however, she was elected. Neera Tanden is not being elected; she's being appointed, and that's very, very different. And so I think that's really where I get frustrated here, is because the rhetoric involved, and I also said that Representative Green is an idiot too. I firmly believe that. But I don't think Miss Tanden is an idiot, but I think she's very smart. So in one respect, but the same level, that level of rhetoric is problematic. And calling people all types of horrible names on social media, even though I just call someone an idiot, but um, I think I did all the respect and all I did that as with all the respect I could, right? But I have a real problem with when you go on social media and calling these people as horrible names, and then that raises the political rhetoric, right? And so I think that's fundamentally problematic in terms of and Donald Trump did it, and he's criticized for that. And so there is a level of hypocrisy there. I think it is there. I'm not trying to be partisan when I call someone an idiot. I'm just calling them an idiot because of their views are completely you know um, not true. And so, anyways, I defended myself. That's enough for this week. So I'll talk to you all next week. Thank you very much.